What's a film that the majority hates but you enjoy? Why do you enjoy this film? Street Fighter. Instead of thinking of it as a movie, think of it as a writer's challenge to take 16 8-bit characters with very little depth and put them together into a storyline. It's a ridiculous storyline, but that's the fun of it. Thinking of the writers struggling with it. I can't really remember much of it, but that bit where all Julia says game over is so camp and over the top. I love it. How can you hate anything with Raw Julia? He was awesome. To me it was a Tuesday. One of the best lines ever in one of the worst movies ever. Brothers Grimm. I love the Halloween/Sleepy Hollow aesthetic, quirky humor, and how it ties several of the Grimm stories into one storyline. Bonus points for Heath Ledger and Matt Damon. OMG. I have never known anyone to know this movie aside from myself. I loved this movie. Underworld series. Kate Beckinsale at her glorious prime. Most teenage boys would be mesmerized by a gun-wielding vampire in latex. I have no idea why the ratings for the subsequent films were so bad. The first one was my absolute favorite and I've watched it dozens of times. The second and the third were decent. The fourth was horrible, and I never even watched the fifth. Waterworld. It's just an enjoyable movie. People got so hyped before it came out that there was no chance it would live up to their expectations. But it's a good movie overall. Not the greatest ever or anything, but just a good movie. I think lots of people like that movie now. Same with Postman. It just kinda wasn't their time anymore when they came out. I think part of the reason I like it is because I didn't see it until about 10 years after it came out. I think for many people like me, they enjoy the movie because the hype and the jokes about how bad it was were over. I remember it being a constant joke on late night TV and SNL type shows for a long time after it came out. It was like a pre-internet meme. Its fan base is definitely building. I imagine someone attempts to remake it within the next decade. Fast and Furious, Tokyo Drift. The driving in this movie is 100% real, in direct opposition to the staging/CGI/hydraulics of past movies. The Tokyo setting is pretty memorable. The car elevator alone still wows me, and it was the movie I used to sway other people over to the idea that these movies could do pretty unique things with cars and driving sequences. It's weird seeing Lil Bow Wow, Shad Moss in a prominent role, and the main guy is so devoid of charisma I can't remember his real name or his character's name despite seeing the movie about 3 or 4 times. But the producers recognized that the driving sensei was probably the coolest motherfucker that series ever had, so they needed to bring him in for ensuing installments. Tokyo Drift is one of the best in the whole series. It's a movie about racing and cars, not just another action movie. I'll defend Tokyo Drift forever. It's an essence of early 2000s style and street racing. I even get nostalgic even thinking about turn of the century tech sometimes. Think Digimon. I'm sad the F&F series didn't follow that formula. I thought they were going to keep going around the world doing stories about different street racing cultures, but instead we got the Forks action shit of the rest of the movies. 1, 2, and 3 will always be a classic to me, no matter how terrible they are. I really like Van Helsing, and I think it is a shame it never turned out sequels as planned. I just love the passion in it. Also, cannot deny, I was just a kid when it came out and it actually introduced me to the Universal horror universe. I really remember, on the DVD was a commercial for a Universe DVD horror box set that was being released, perhaps even in promotion for the movie, in which case, thank you Van Helsing. And I bought that DVD box set. I was just a 14-year-old girl lol. The store clerk was looking so oddly at me. I bought the big one with the 3 head statues and all the movies, and I watched all the movies and the documentaries, and I still own them all. And all of that is because of Van Helsing, which is also watched multiple times. So yeah, gosh dang it, I have a fond relationship with that movie, even if I can see in hindsight it's not that great. Epic soundtrack. Cool steampunk weapons, and Richard Roxburgh's over-the-top portrayal of Dracula. This movie deserves more recognition. The recent Godzilla film. Keep seeing reviews about how it was boring and had terrible human characters. I'm legit confused as all hell cause I was pumped the entire way through. Felt like a child again watching it. Also thought the humans were far better than what 2014 Godzilla had to offer. As well, after watching some of the original Japanese Godzilla films, I thought this movie was perfectly in line with what these films are supposed to be. I'm legit confused. Watching Godzilla movies expecting the human characters to be good or more than just a vehicle for the plot to move forward is like going to McDonald's and expecting to lose weight. Yeah, I went to see big monsters fight, and I got it. I don't care about what the humans are doing. That's like seeing a ballet and complaining that the bits between the dancing sucked. God forbid a kaiju movie focuses on the kaiju and not humans. Iron Man 3. I actually liked the Mandarin twist in the end. I was surprised when I learned most people thought it was the worst Iron Man movie. I like it, but I didn't like the second one. Easily my favorite of the three. I liked the panic attack stuff that they got him doing. It made sense for his character to suddenly start getting vulnerable and not as stable as he liked to think he was. Yes, that's what made it such a great movie. Tony overcoming his vulnerabilities with a side plot of the Mandarin and Flame Guy Villain. That skydiving / Air Force One scene was so amazing on the big screen. I really liked that, and the movie was decent. War of the Worlds, but having looked at its scores online it actually did pretty well, which is strange. I remember everyone disliking it at the time. I think it's one of my favorite movies because I was really young when it came out, too young, looking back, and it's the first memory of seeing a grown-up film I have. My uncle took me to see it and immediately fell asleep, but I loved every minute. Edit. On Rotten Tomatoes it looks like the audience score is pretty low, so maybe it was liked amongst critics, but not by everyone else. Lol, I like War of the Worlds. The only thing I find annoying about the film is the old deadbeat dad trope and the kids. And the way his son turns up miraculously unscathed at the end. The whole dynamic with him and his son was flawed. Like there is a literal alien invasion and this kid is still hanging on to his angst for his father. People are being scooped into these giant alien people collectors / whatever, and he still runs off and gives the "you'll never understand me" dad trope. The original Resident Evil. Yes, it's about a bunch of people running around shooting zombies. You know, because it's Resident Evil. The funny thing is that is not what the early games are about at all. They're about avoiding zombies, resource management, and weird puzzles. Listen, Frank, I gotta take a shit. You can either give me the golden matchbox so I can go get the blue crank and break open the statue that lets me press the button to flush, or I can shit on your desk. Your call. One of the reviews I saw said something like the most unbelievable part of this movie is that a man had sex with Mila Jovovich and didn't remember it. The Warcraft movie. I feel like reviewers wrote it off just because it's a video game movie and used "I don't play video games" as an excuse to not give it a chance. I never played the game myself, but it would irritate me when people checked out just because the world and the kingdom have the same name, for example. Beside the stiff acting from the human characters in some scenes, it has an interesting story, jaw-dropping CG, great voice acting, and most importantly it shows, but doesn't tell, when it comes to subplots and world building, something that most movies still struggle with. I had a hard time following it, and I know the backstory of Warcraft. I feel like it tried to cram just a bit too much. It did do a fantastic job adapting the world, though. I'm sad we won't get a sequel, because I think a Thrall-centered movie would have been a bit easier to make coherent. All the scenes with the orcs were great. I enjoyed that. I loved it. I grew up on Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, and WoW, so it felt like going home. Apparently people hate Disney's Pocahontas because it's racist. I watched that movie to death when I was little, and I swear that not once did I get the message that either white people or Native Americans were bad in and of themselves. Rather that greedy and or misguided people fuck things up. I still love the movie. I think it's beautiful, with stunning animation and great songs. I wonder if the people that consider the song "Savage" is offensive have ever actually listened to it. I think people say it's racist because of a whitewash interpretation. That is the message being read as, white man bad but red man may be almost as bad. Mistakes were made both ways, so please ignore that the whites were bad. Not my take on the movie, just how I've understood the deeper criticism on it, that it overlooks historic events. I think it also has a lot to do with the Native Americans in that movie not really being based on anything other than the idea of Native Americans, and the happy ending where everyone gets along instead of the natives being slaughtered and moved to increasingly poor geographic areas, until we made them death march to their final reservation, after breaking treaty after treaty with them. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Agree. It was savaged, so I expected to not even make it to the end, but it was stupidly entertaining to me. I expected it to be meh when I went to see it, but it actually turned out to be very exciting. And the music was brilliant. I actually really like this film. I love the odd bits of weird conversations. Jude Law was fantastic. The fight scenes were well done. Plus the magenta animals were awesome. The soundtrack was perfect. Overall just a fun entertaining movie. Each time I see this one I enjoy it even more. Such energy. I like all Matrix movies and think it's an overall great trilogy. I still feel Hugo Weaving should have won some award for his acting as Agent Smith. Mr. Anderson. The first one is the best one, but the next two are still great enjoyable movies. The first film had a huge cultural impact that they couldn't hope to live up to, and anyone who completely writes off a movie with Monica Bellucci in latex needs to give their head a wobble. Plus the Animatrix is a phenomenal prequel. Honestly, the Animatrix is my second favorite Matrix film after the original. Prometheus. Some of the complaints I've seen on that movie are ridiculous. For instance, there's an infamous scene toward the end of the movie where Charlize Theron's character is running away from a rolling ship. If she would veer right or left, she'd survive. Instead, she runs in a straight line and gets squished. TBH, that's perfectly plausible. In a panic, once the flight or fight response kicks in, people do all kinds of dumb shit. But more than that, I just think the whole premise of the movie is cool. I like the idea that a super race of aliens created mankind and left them on Earth, while they also created a super weapon that can destroy all life on a planet. It's badass. And the ending, when the weapon is revealed, is so cool. When the geologist, whose only job was to map the caves, got lost on his way back to the ship in those very same caves, I was done. The characters were, for me, dumb and unlikable, with the exception of Fassbender's David. That is why I wasn't a fan. 3 was a lot of things I liked about the film, but the people were not one. Twilight. I associated with a lot of happy memories and I love the colors, the scenery and the soundtrack is fucking dope. Yeah, I cannot fault the soundtrack, it's unreal. And it's one of the strongest adaptations of a book ever. Basically nothing changes from the source material. It's just not everyone's kind of story, including Robert Pattinson. However, I loved those books as a kid, but I had largely grown out of them by the time the films were made. If you don't like the story, fine, but I agree with you that they are well done for what they are. Batman vs Superman. I've heard many people complaining about this film's poor directing / acting etc. Yet I don't find anything that bad. It's not the best, but not too bad either, and I enjoy it every time I see it airing. BTW, Christian Bale is my fav Batman though. I know a lot of hardcore Batman / Superman fans were more or less offended by it for how sloppily it adapted its source material and characters. Personally, I wasn't really offended by it, since I'm not a hardcore comic book fan, but I did find it rather boring and confusing. The drama felt rather contrived, perhaps in large part due to the fact that there was virtually no build up beforehand. Superman had one movie in the DCEU before this one, while neither Batman, Wonder Woman nor Lex Luthor had any development at all. The Amazing Spider-Man films. Love the swinging, love the Spider-Man 2 suit, love Peter and Gwen. Andrew Garfield was a Spider-Man fan. Look up Andrew Garfield Comic Con 2011 on YouTube, who got fucked over because Sony wanting to compete with the MCU by building their own cinematic universe plus fast tracking the Sinister Six. There was some seriously great stuff in those movies. And as dumb as Spider-Man 2 was, I still like the look and feel of it and enjoy rewatching it. The action sequences in this series were incredible, especially in Spider-Man 2. The music was pretty nice and there were some great themes in there, just bogged down by an overstuffed script. And as for Peter being a bad person, this is an interpretation where he starts out as a stupid, rebellious, impulsive teenager. And a lot of us were like that as teens. It also gave us what I miss in the Holland series the most, the feel of New York City. He was a great Spider-Man, not a very good Peter Parker, and got screwed over by trying to compete in the end. But they are definitely enjoyable films. Olympus/London Has Fallen. I dunno, I just liked them. Thought it was just a typical action film, and I liked the setting that they were both in, so I thoroughly enjoyed them. Was really surprised when I first saw the mass hatred towards them. Also, the Percy Jackson films, mainly because I haven't read the books, to be able to compare. The films are actually good, but people just hate them in comparison to the books. Some people said the same thing about Ready Player One, and that's one of my favorite films ever. Shrug. The Last Jedi. I thought the movie was fine. First time I watched I liked it, second time not so much, but I enjoyed both times. I loved it. Totally understand a couple of the severe weaknesses, but I saw it as a man who cared about Star Wars giving the series what it needed. An escape from the Skywalkers. Using up all the Return of the Jedi imagery and Empire Strikes Back imagery, so the third movie has to use its own stuff. It's fun if you don't think about it. Once you start to follow the plot, then it kinda starts to get silly. My most hated bit is you need to find the Master Codebreaker. He is the only one that can help us. He won't help? Oh well, this awfully convenient random dude from prison works just fine. What Maz actually says is he's the only man I would trust who can do it. No one ever says he's the only one who could do it. They go with a different codebreaker, and he betrays them. Yes, it's still overly convenient that they find him by just randomly being in the same cell after being arrested, but the guy Maz gives them is never actually said to be the only one capable. James Cameron's Avatar. I have the collector's extended edition on Blu-ray. I absolutely love it. The cultures, the movie score, the nature, all that. I can easily watch the almost 4-hour version weekly. I honestly don't get the hate. Edit. From what I can gather from the replies, it's not hatred, just easily forgotten due to the plot, which, BTW, is one of my favorite parts also. People hate that movie, more so people aren't enthused, often calling it Pocahontas in space. It was a victim of its own popularity, to be honest. People fucking loved it, and would not stop talking about it for months. So the people that didn't enjoy it snapped, and it went from not that great to here's a list of every reason I hate it.